I was staring out of my apartment window, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath me, when my phone buzzed again. The velvet smooth blouse I had chosen for tonight clung slightly uncomfortably, a reminder of how much I paid attention to appearances. I shouldn't have been thinking about that right now, not with my glass of wine in hand and my apartment smelling faintly of lavender. The message was from my brother. Just 2 words. Remember Italy? My stomach sank. Memories I had tried to bury, memories of silk scarves, mistaken addresses, and the most expensive mistake of my life, came rushing back like a storm. I had spent $89,803 for his wedding, every last penny earned from years of sweat and late nights, only to be sent to the wrong Italian city as a prank. A cruel, careless joke. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around my phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to scream. But another part, the one that had built a life from that very betrayal, reminded me that I was no longer the girl who cried in hotel lobbies, lost and alone. I sipped the wine and let the faint irony of it all wash over me. Here I was, successful, independent, in a penthouse I could barely afford to imagine back then, yet this little ping from my brother still had the power to make my chest tighten. Maybe tonight it was time to confront it, time to see how far I'd really come. I remember the chaos of that summer, like it happened yesterday. I was 24, still trying to find my footing in the world, working 3 jobs just to cover rent and save a little for myself. And then came the wedding, my brother's big day, and my parents' unspoken expectation that I would pay for it. I'd never hesitated before when it came to helping family, but $89,803 was more than money. It was a piece of my future, a tangible measure of all the sacrifices I had made in silence. I handed over the check with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You'll thank me later," I had said, and my brother had laughed, patting my shoulder like I was his little sidekick. "You worry too much, Maddie. That prank was supposed to be harmless," he said. "You'll have a story to tell." And so I found myself on a plane to Italy, convinced I would be swept into the charm of Venice or Florence, only to land in Bari, hundreds of miles away from where the wedding festivities were held. The hotel smelled faintly of mildew, and the streets were quieter, emptier, and somehow harsher than the pictures I had imagined. My hands shook as I tried calling my brother, my mother, anyone really, to tell them I was in the wrong city. Every call ended with laughter on the other end or silence that felt like a verdict. I wandered through cobblestone alleys, clutching a small, leather-bound notebook my grandmother had given me. "Write your own story, Maddie," she had said, pressing it into my hands. "Not the one they want for you, the one you choose for yourself." The notebook smelled faintly of vanilla and old paper, and I held onto it like a lifeline, scribbling frustrations, fears, and tiny victories in ink that smudged from my tears. That week, I learned more about patience, grit, and independence than I had in my entire life up to that point. I ate street sandwiches alone, navigated unfamiliar trains, and forced myself to speak broken Italian to locals who regarded me with polite curiosity. Each wrong turn became a lesson, each awkward interaction a proof of resilience. By the time the real wedding was over, I had made a decision. I would no longer be the one who bent, who paid, who tolerated being dismissed. That $89,803? It was gone. But my resolve was priceless. I was going to build something for myself, something my family couldn't touch or mock. Back in the States, I was different. Not the same wide-eyed, over-trusting sister who had spent nearly $90,000 for a wedding I barely attended. It was as if Bari had carved a new edge into me. I carried my grandmother's leather-bound notebook everywhere, filling page after page with ideas, sketches, and dreams. I didn't tell a soul what I was doing. My parents assumed I was struggling through another job. My brother thought I was nursing my Italian adventure with bitterness. They couldn't have been more wrong. I met Clara Stanton at a networking event by accident. She was older, elegant, the kind of woman who moved as if she owned the room without ever raising her voice. She glanced at my portfolio and, instead of dismissing it like most did, she leaned in. "You have talent, Madeline," she said. "And fire. Don't let anyone, not even family, tell you what your value is." That single sentence became my North Star. The first months were brutal. I worked nights redesigning websites, taking on small clients who didn't always pay on time, and learning the brutal lessons of entrepreneurship the hard way. I burned through coffee, late-night snacks, and even my patience, often questioning whether I had the skill to turn my ideas into something tangible. But then, the first win came. A boutique in New York hired me to rebrand their online presence. The project was small but polished, and when they referred me to a bigger client, I realized I had something rare: trust. People believed in me, even if my family didn't. I kept my successes quiet, posting vague updates on social media. A simple, exciting project underway, rather than anything revealing. I wanted to grow without the shadow of expectation, without the family drama tainting the pride of accomplishment. Over the next few years, I expanded. I invested carefully, learned marketing strategies, hired a small, loyal team, and quietly amassed a reputation in my field. By the time I was 30, I had my own studio, a sleek office overlooking Manhattan, and a client list that read like a who's who of design and branding. My net worth? Enough to make that $89,803 look like a drop in the ocean. And no one in my family had the slightest clue. The notebook was still with me, dog-eared and stained. Each page chronicled failures, tiny victories, and dreams realized in secret. Every time I looked at it, I remembered Bari. The wrong city, the cruel prank, the loneliness that became my training ground. That memory, once bitter, had transformed into fuel, a reminder that I could take anything life, or family, threw at me and turn it into power. And so I moved forward, confident in my skills, my independence, and my worth, never forgetting the lessons of that Italian city where my world had been turned upside down. I had built something solid, something untouchable, and I was ready, though I didn't know it yet, for the day my past would finally catch up with me. The knock on my office door was hesitant, polite. I glanced up from my laptop, the New York skyline glowing behind me like a halo of possibility. And there they were, my brother and parents, stepping into my world, as if they were entering some kind of stranger's home. I didn't stand immediately. I let them take it in first. The office wasn't ostentatious, but it radiated success. Sleek glass walls, abstract paintings I'd handpicked on trips to Europe, awards and framed articles lining the shelves. My team moved around efficiently, papers in hand, phones ringing, a small, powerful ecosystem that I had built from scratch. My parents' eyes flicked around nervously. My mother's hands twisted a scarf she usually wore with perfect composure. My father's jaw was tight. And my brother? Oh, he looked shocked, as if he had just walked into someone else's life entirely. I leaned back in my chair, a glass of water in my hand, the sunlight catching the faint golden highlights in my hair. "You came all this way," I said softly, almost conversationally. "To see me?" My brother opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed him. That little smirk he once wore like a badge of superiority was gone. "You wanted to know where I ended up after Italy," I continued, letting the words hang in the air. "You sent me to Bari as a prank. You thought it would be funny, that I'd flounder, that I'd be humiliated. Well, you were half right." I gestured to the office around me. I did flounder, but not for long. I found my footing, my talent, and my voice. And I built this. I pulled out a small tablet and swiped to a presentation: company valuation, revenue growth charts, client testimonials, and images of our recent high-profile projects. My net worth glared at them in bold numbers, numbers they could no longer ignore. $2.4 million in liquid assets. Ownership of 3 boutique firms. Board positions I had quietly earned. Silence. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's the silence of shock, shame, and disbelief. You did this?" my mother whispered, voice trembling. "Yes," I said, calm but firm. "Without your help, without anyone handing me a safety net. Every bit of this is mine. And every decision I made was for me, not for you." My brother's face had gone pale. "Maddie, You laughed when I called you from Bari, remember? You thought I'd be stranded and defeated. But that city taught me more than any of you ever could. It taught me resilience. It taught me that I could survive betrayal and turn it into my advantage. I leaned forward, eyes locking onto my brother's. So, congratulations on your wedding. You had a good laugh at my expense. But I hope you're listening now. I'm not the same person you sent to the wrong city. That girl no longer exists. My parents exchanged glances. My father's hands tightened around his briefcase. My mother's lips quivered. And my brother, he just looked at me, truly looked for the first time in years, and realized he had underestimated me, as he always had. I let the silence stretch for another heartbeat. Then I smiled softly, almost kindly. Now that we're all on the same page, we can talk about moving forward. But not on your terms. On mine. For the first time, I felt the full weight of control, of power, and of vindication. Not revenge, but justice. They had underestimated me. They had laughed at me. And now, they were forced to see the woman I had become. Unshakable, independent, and unapologetically successful. I rose from my chair and walked slowly toward the window, letting the city lights reflect off the glass. Behind me, my parents and brother stood frozen, the weight of their own expectations and underestimation pressing down on them. For the first time, I felt fully in control. Not just of this room, but of my past, my future, and the people who had once tried to define me. I've thought a lot about this, I said, turning to face them. And I've decided I will help, but only under my conditions. Conditions that make sense, not just for me, but for all of us. My mother straightened her scarf, trying to hide the unease in her posture. My father's hands twitched at his sides. My brother's mouth opened and closed, waiting. First, I continued, I will no longer finance mistakes. That's money, yes, but more importantly, it's respect. If you want me involved in any future plans, personal or professional, you need to come prepared, with accountability and a plan. I walked over to my grandmother's notebook, which rested on my desk, and picked it up. This, I said, tapping the leather cover, was given to me when I was at my lowest. Every page of it represents effort, courage, and self-belief. If you want my help, you need to embrace the same values: accountability, persistence, and honesty. My mother's lips trembled. We just want a better relationship with you, she said softly. And you can have it, I replied. But only if you respect my boundaries. No more manipulation, no more belittling, no more thinking that money or power can fix what you've ignored for years. If you choose to change, I'll support you, but the initiative must come from you. I turned to my brother, whose eyes darted nervously around the room. And you, I said, voice firmer now, need to stop pranking and dismissing people's feelings. The joke in Bari wasn't funny, it was cruel. If you want my respect, you have to demonstrate empathy, responsibility, and a willingness to see consequences for your actions. I paused, letting the words sink in. The silence was heavy, but not hostile. This was different from past confrontations. This wasn't about yelling, pleading, or crying. It was about setting terms and holding firm. Finally, I said, lowering my voice slightly, we can only move forward if we acknowledge that relationships require effort. You can't just coast on history, or family ties, or guilt. Change is necessary, and it starts now. My parents exchanged glances, and I saw the first flicker of understanding, perhaps even hope, in their eyes. My brother's jaw relaxed slightly, and for a moment, I felt the tiniest spark of relief. They could still choose to grow. I walked back to my desk and sat down, leaning back in my chair. I care about all of you, I said, almost softly now, but I will never compromise my dignity or my independence again. That's non-negotiable. For the first time, I saw them not as my captors or critics, but as people who could be part of my world, if they were willing to earn it. And that was a power I had never felt before, not truly. Weeks passed, and the shift was subtle but unmistakable. My parents, once hesitant and defensive, started to change not overnight, but in small, meaningful ways. My mother began asking questions about my projects, not with judgment, but with curiosity. She tried new hobbies she had long abandoned, and I noticed her smile reaching her eyes more often. My father, still formal, began volunteering at a local charity I supported, taking steps toward humility and engagement rather than control. And my brother, well, he sent a sincere apology, handwritten, and for the first time, seemed to understand the weight of the joke he had once thought harmless. I watched these changes quietly, holding my grandmother's leather-bound notebook on my lap, its worn edges reminding me of where I had started. Every scribbled page, every lesson, every tear I had shed in Bari had brought me here, to a place where my strength wasn't measured by money alone, but by resilience, self-respect, and the ability to forgive, on my terms. I had learned that empowerment isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you are enough, that you are capable, and that you deserve respect. And sometimes, it's about giving others a chance to rise too, if they are willing. I stood by my office window, the city glowing beneath me, and reflected on the journey. The wrong Italian city had been a cruel joke, but it had been my crucible. That week of confusion, frustration, and loneliness had forged a version of me that no prank, no family drama, and no setback could ever break. I smiled faintly, touching the notebook's cover. "Write your own story," my grandmother had said. And I had. Every chapter, every triumph, every setback was mine. And now, I was writing the next chapter, not for anyone else, but for myself. The city lights sparkled like 1,000 possibilities. I had my life, my independence, and my voice. I had transformed betrayal into strength and pain into a roadmap for success. And I knew this. No one would ever underestimate me again. I turned to my team, my family, those who were willing to meet me on my terms, and whispered, almost to myself, I survived Bari. I survived betrayal. And I am unstoppable. For the first time, I felt completely free.